Good morning. Welcome to the briefing of the EPP group. The chairman, Manfred WEBER, has the floor.
Yeah, good morning, and sorry for the early start into the day. The background is that we will have today the formal sitting with the President of Lithuania, and as a matter of respect, we should be in the plenary for this. So let me reflect on some of the issues, the political elements of the week. First of all, I want to underline that for us economically, the unity of the Western world is key for protecting our way of life as Western world. That's why the trip of Ursula von der Leyen towards our Canadian friends, to meet with our Canadian friends and also to go to Washington, was extremely welcomed and extremely positive, especially on the battery development. This is crucial for our car industry, the agreement there. The second thing is that we are ready for this raw materials agreement with the Americans. And thirdly, I want to underline that we have to avoid let me say, a wave of subsidy race in the European Union. We are welcoming the change of the competition rules in the European Union to give a proper answer on the IRA. That is what EPP is also asking for. But it's good to have a common understanding with the Americans to limit this competition on subsidies in the green tech area. Having this in mind, it was a good step forward to find with our American friends a common understanding on this. But still there is a lot to do. And towards the Americans, I want to underline that our group, my group, the EPP, was always in favor of a real trade agreement with the Americans. We discussed this years ago when we had TTIP on the table, and a lot of other groups were opposing to this. So I think we need a real trade deal with the US, and that has to be upgraded. So we have to push for this on the long run. This is linked to what will happen from the Commission's point of view this week in Europe. So this week is an extremely important week for the competitiveness of the European Union. We are welcoming this. My group, the European People's Party, was always insisting in the jobs aspect that we have to prioritize economic growth and the future of our industry and the SMEs in Europe. That's why it will be a good week that the Commission will present a package of legislative initiatives to strengthen the competitiveness of our industries. So Net Zero Industry, the Raw Materials Act, all these things are positive things for us, and must give the direction that we ask our industry to invest in Europe and not abroad. We expect that this package will also boost competitiveness in the areas where we are investing in the clean tech industry. That is a priority for doing so. And it's also clear that this is, in a way, also an answer to the competition with China. I think we also need to protect our industry against the exploding energy costs, because one element is the investment conditions to build up a company, to build up a factory, to build up a plant. But the other thing is the long-term costs on producing products and services, and that is linked to the high energy costs, where we still need further answers to do so. We want also a net zero industry, but we want to have also a net zero bureaucracy. So that is also an important element for us. That we reduce administrative burden and also we get also quicker procedures. I want to highlight one special legislative file which created in the last days some debates, and that is about the CO2 on cars. You know that especially after the uncertainty in Berlin with the German government's behavior, we see now uncertainty on the whole file. After years of negotiations, we don't know any more about, first of all, the German positioning. So normally we should expect that they keep their promises they gave during the negotiations. And I also must flag that this is also a liberal problem. You know that Minister Bon in France was heavily attacking the German government now, and Minister Wissing in Germany is also a liberal. So both of them are liberals. So it would be great to see from Stefan and from the Liberal Party in the European Union whether they are in favor or whether they are against. Our positioning as EPP was always clear. We were in favor of an ambitious climate approach to get 2050 climate neutral, and also for the car industry 2035 climate neutral. That was our positioning, but we always insisting in the technological neutral approach to do so. And then finally, migration, long-standing issue on European agenda. First of all, our thoughts are again with the victims in the Mediterranean Sea. I must underline that this is not an Italian, that is not a Maltese, that is not a Spanish or a Greek problem, that is an European problem. And for the moment, I don't see so much activities to really identify this as a European problem. In the last European summit, in the special summit beginning of February, we made progress, and that is good, that we had a more realistic migration policy, especially when it is about the issue of fences and also about physical infrastructure on the external border. We need to protect our borders, and we need to protect the refugees. Both sides are on the same medal. Again, the main message for us is that we should not let the South alone. It is a joint responsibility. For us in the European Parliament, I regret that until now we couldn't manage with the Socialists to find a final agreement on the legislative file, on the Migration Pact. Until now we don't have a fixed slot in the Libe Committee to vote on this. And my appeal is to the other groups, speed up. The Council is ready for negotiations on the Migration Pact, and we should also be ready as European Parliament to move forward. So that's why we are pushing for this, and the main message today is that we should not leave the South alone. Thank you so much.
Now the questions. Christian.
Oui, Monsieur Weber, deux questions. La première, je suis désolé, mais la première, je voudrais rebondir sur vos félicitations à Madame von der Leyen sur son voyage aux États-Unis. Mais ne trouvez-vous pas qu'effectivement les Américains, comme partenaires, nous vendent leur énergie à un prix trop élevé et que l'on pourrait attendre, dans une situation qui est aussi difficile que celle que traverse l'Europe, qui est en train de décrocher des énergies fossiles de la Russie, un peu plus de souplesse et un peu plus de compréhension de la part d'un allié que sont les États-Unis et pas nous vendre leur LNG au prix coûtant, au prix du marché, c'est-à-dire très cher, ce qui renforce notre facture. Et ma deuxième question, elle est un peu plus politique. Je voudrais comprendre si, à votre avis, Fratelli d'Italia, le mouvement de Madame Meloni, est soluble dans le PPE. On vous voit faire de beaucoup d'approches avec Madame Meloni. J'ai compris les trois conditions que vous aviez énoncées pour parler avec elle. Et elles sont remplies, mais est-ce que ça suffit pour légitimer ce parti? Est-ce que ça suffirait pour lui donner une place au sein du PPE? Merci.
Point about the high price. You're right, we are paying currently high prices for energy. That is a big burden for our economy, and for our industry it could also lead to change their place of production, so to go out of the European Union. For us, I have to say it's not first of all that we should complain about those who are helping us. I must be very clear on this, because after the start of the Russian war, there was simply the need, the demand was high, and that's why if Americans are delivering LNG gas, and also the Norwegian friends are helping us more than ever before, then we should be happy about their help, that they are ready to deliver this gas. I have to say that the problem with the high gas costs were created by ourselves. So we did Nord Stream 2, we did Nord Stream 1. We thought that this big portion of cheap Russian gas will continue, and that was obviously not realistic. So that's why we are at the moment suffering by our wrong decisions we made as Europeans. You know, I and the big majority of my group always opposed to Nord Stream 2, for example, that we always thought that this is a wrong investment, but that's now the price we pay for our wrong decisions we made. And for the long run, it's clear that we need to boost renewable energies. On long run, they will be extremely cheap. So wind and also solar energy will be extremely cheap. The transition is our challenge. And, you know, in all these aspects, my group is also in favor of being also pragmatic and not ideologically driven. That's why majority of my group is also supporting nuclear as an option, that this is a serious option to produce climate-friendly energy. So what we need is a realistic, a pragmatic approach towards the climate change achievements or climate change steps in front of us, and not an ideologically driven like the Greens and others are doing so. And the second thing, so there is nothing to report about any kind of talks with other parties. For the EPP, you know, we have a clear positioning in our belief in what we stand for. When it is, for example, about rule of law, then my party, the European People's Party, is today the rule of law party of Europe, because in the center and Eastern European countries, for example, in Poland, it is Donald Tusk who is fighting against this. We are having the flag of Europe, we are having the flag of rule of law in our hands. It is in Croatia, Andrej Plenković, who brought Croatia towards Euro and towards the Schengen area. It is in Romania, Klaus Johannes, who is fighting for a modern Romania. So I'm proud about this. And if I may be a little bit politically, let me say, angry and to show my disappointment, I want to tell you that I'm sometimes a little bit surprised why nobody is currently writing articles, and that's up to you. I only express my opinion on this, but why nobody is writing articles that Podemos is not supporting the Spanish government in their support for Ukraine. Governmental responsibility. We don't talk about party politics. We speak about the government in preparation of the next European Council. Spain will take over. Sanchez will take over. And there was last week a vote in the Spanish parliament where Podemos, part of government, disagreed, didn't vote it. 4 ministers didn't vote it for the support of Ukraine on military side. So I don't speak about theoretical party activities. I speak about a governmental decision. And that's why I'm sometimes a little bit surprised why nobody is having a look on what is happening there, that we arrive with a new presidency in the European Union, with the Spanish presidency, with a lot of uncertainty whether they support the Ukraine approach or not. That is today's situation in Madrid. So that's why let's talk about real problems on governmental side. And there I really would like to see that Podemos must clarify their positioning. They are part of a government in front of the European Council presidency for Spain, and I would ask that Sanchez clarifies what is the opinion of the Spanish government in regard to Ukraine. We cannot accept any kind of uncertainty in such a moment of history.
Next question.
Good morning. Just to reflect upon your words, because just now you said that it wasn't wise to invest in Nord Stream, but do you think it's wise to invest in solar batteries, for example, because China is the biggest world producer? So isn't it like you leave one dependency and create the other? And the next question is about proposal of Viktor Orban, who is almost like Spanish government. He said that it's very risky to continue with the war because he said that the risks are so high that he calls governments for peace talks and ceasefire because it becomes uncontrollable at the moment, he thinks.
So on the dependency, you are right. We should not take one, in a way, dependency away and get another one in exchange. That's why you are right on substance. And that's why I count a lot that the raw materials proposal from the Commission is really a solid one. We have lithium inside of the European Union, we have it here, but we must also overcome then our internal blockades about bureaucracy. Commission was in Sweden, you know about this. They went there with new sources. Also in Serbia we have some sources for these raw materials. So what we need is to deblock our own behavior. We have to speed up on these issues to use our sources in a better way. And if you allow me, having this dependency question in mind, I would also ask that the European Union must quickly come to a common understanding about the China policy. You know that the European Union today has no common China policy prepared. We don't have a text where we define what is our approach. And this is also one of the messages we learned from the US trip, that Joe Biden is asking us, are you now on our side? Can we answer the Chinese challenge? And that's a real fundamental challenge for the next decades. Can we answer this together? Or will you do a separate way as Europeans? And my positioning is clear. the Western world has to join forces. We have to stay together, and that means reduce dependency towards China and not increasing them. So that must be the general line. If I may say it in one phrase, I would say all China activities must be considered under a kind of a Taiwan clause. That what would happen if in Taiwan something is getting wrong? So that must be always in our mind when we decide now about the future of our EU-China political approach. And the second thing, I cannot comment on Viktor Orban because, again, what he is doing also to keep Sweden and Finland in the waiting room for NATO and so on is unacceptable. It's unacceptable. He is part of the Western world. He is benefiting from the Western world, so he should also show solidarity now. So that's why I don't comment on Orban. That's clear that he is that this is not acceptable. But I want to comment because I had the chance 2 weeks ago to be in Kiev together with the EPP presidency. We had meetings there, and I just want to share with you that was for me 2 elements are important. One is about still the shock. I met the mayor of Bucha, also the priest, the Orthodox priest of Bucha, and when you speak there with the representatives, it's still the shock is brutal. They kill people, the war crimes there, what happened there. So one side is the shock and the brutality of the Russian invaders, but also I must tell you what is also promising in a way is the optimism. 90% of the Ukrainian peoples, and when you directly speak with the waiter in the restaurant and with the people on the street and with the soldier who protected our mission, when you speak with them, everybody tells you we will not live in Putin's world. We will overcome this. We will win this war. We see so much will among ordinary citizens. That's why there is for us only one message, and that is full support for Ukraine. My party is fully committed to this. Roberta Metsola went first to Kiev. Ursula von der Leyen was clear on this. I myself, a lot of colleagues in the parliament, Andrius Kubilius, we were committed to fight for Ukraine. That is our positioning, and that is what we stand for. And that's why, again, what is worrisome with Podemos, that already parts of governments in Europe are distancing themselves from this kind of development. That's why we have to keep our full solidarity with Ukraine.
Thanks. Eddie Wax from Politico. What's your view on the new rules coming in the next few months for MEPs, former MEPs who will no longer be allowed to enter the parliament to lobby their colleagues? The EPP wanted it to keep to only 6 months, but isn't that a very, very short window? I mean, after the elections, nothing's really even happening after 6 months, so shouldn't it be longer to really be effective? Thanks.
We fully support the 14 points presented by Roberta Metsola, and yesterday in the Bureau they decided accordingly. So we fully support this ambitious plan. I think the more important thing is that for former MEPs we have now a clear distinction between those who are entering into the parliament as former MEPs to visit, and therefore they need in the future a daily permission in a way to get the access. Currently every former MEP has access without any registration, so in the future they must register it, and they can have then access like all other visitors, so we support this. And for the lobbyists, it's not so important, I would say, the length of this cooling down period. The more important thing is that they are also obliged to register in the transparency register of the European Union. That is a key element for creating transparency. So everybody, whether he was a former MEP or whether he is not a former MEP, must register in the transparency register to get access to the European Parliament. That is, I think, the game changer. That is a lesson we learned now out of the Panzeri case. And again, for us, the key question is to stick to the 14 points we presented in the COP a few weeks ago.
Laura.
Hi, Mr. Weber. I have a couple of questions back on the Spanish idea that you just mentioned. I was wondering if you could assess how the position of the coalition or part of the coalition of the Spanish government can impact the European position on things like Ukraine, when you see that there's no minister from Podemos in ministries like foreign affairs or defense. How exactly is it going to impact the work in the council? And if the same thing could have been said, like if your opinion is that the same thing could have been said about presidencies that have had coalitions with the far right, like Austria did, or like Sweden is doing right now. Thank you.
For the Swedish presidency, things are crystal clear, and Ulf Kristersson is guaranteeing that in Sweden, also in Finland, in all the Nordic countries, people are fully committed to Ukraine, so you don't see a problem there with a pro-Ukrainian approach through all party political camps. So they know what it means to stand alone. They know what it means to be under pressure from Russia. That's why there is no doubt about this. And you know, one of my 3 criteria for any kind of cooperation is pro-Ukraine, pro-Europe, and pro-rule of law. That are basic things for us as EPP in any kind of formation of government. And you know, for the Spanish administrative side, I see your point that the ministers responsible for Ukraine policy, foreign affairs and defense are in the hand of socialists. So that's why Sanchez can hopefully deliver. But again, if we have now ministers who are marching out in the streets when there is a NATO summit taking place in Madrid, like it happened last summer, the government of Spain is demonstrating against the NATO summit in Madrid. Sorry, that's crazy. Huh? That's crazy. Huh? That's simply crazy. That's May I be very outspoken? I was attacked because Berlusconi said one crazy statement. I was European-wide attacked by all of you about this, and good to do so, because I have to clarify my camp. And I cancelled a meeting, a very important meeting of EPP in Italy, due to a crazy statement of Berlusconi, who is not in government, who is not having any kind of governmental responsibility. But I do my job to clarify things in my team. I do my job. And the same is for the socialists. Please tell me, what is now Sanchez doing? Podemos in the parliament, in government, ministers there in Spain are voting against their own government, not supporting Ukraine anymore. That's the situation in Madrid. Tell me, what is now going on? You can call it democracy, but then also for others democracy, to have a colorful landscape of politicians positioning themselves. In this case, we are really talking about a big question. The Spanish presidency will take over in a few months. They are representing the Council on international and European level. They have an important role on deal-making in all the files we have in front of us. And there, the only thing I expect is that the Spanish government clarifies their position towards Ukraine. That is the only point I want to see. Sorry for this.
Last question before Irache comes. Very last.
And I have follow-up because you mentioned Taiwan and this position of Joe Biden, who asked Europe to form its own point of view. So do you mean that Europe can also participate in Taiwan conflict if it erupts? Because in press there were a lot of articles that it might happen before 27, before the end of third term of Chairman Xi. So is it a risk for Europe also that it has to be involved in this conflict somehow?
Well, the conflict, the possible conflict between China and Taiwan is also our challenge because it's about values. It's about the way of life, like in Ukraine. It's probably on the other side of the world, more distance, okay, but the basic problem behind is the same. What we are facing, and we are regretting this, everybody is not happy about this, but what we are facing is obviously a global landscape where we are again confronted with another way of life, with an autocratic dictatorship way of life. That is a challenge in front of us, and there Europe cannot say we do business and the rest we don't care. That will not work. That will not work. That's why I ask really to come together as European leaders to find a common understanding about our China policy, and to be also clear. It's not about an offensive anti-China policy. No? We want to have reasonable cooperation where we find a common understanding. For example, on climate change, let's do it together. Let's use the opportunities to work with the Chinese authorities. But if we have fields and areas where we obviously see also the conflicts coming up and also the problems coming up, we have to be firm and we have to be together with our American friends.
May I just, but how can you afford it? Because if you say that climate policy is dependent, for example, on solar batteries, and there are a huge import from China in our chips, and all this information industry is very heavily dependent. So is Europe prepared to carry on? Because the blow can be very strong from the behalf of Chinese Communist Party.
Nobody is asking for any kind of stop of relationship or stop of economic trade or something like this. Nobody is asking for this. So we want to have stability, first of all. We want to do this on stable ground. And again, everything what we do from now on must be considered under a kind of a Taiwan clause, to have this always in mind. What would happen economically, politically, militarily, if there would be any kind of offensive against Taiwan? So that is what we should have in mind and what we should do from now on. But the precondition is to find a common understanding among European countries. And that's why what I'm asking for, Europe needs a joint, a common China policy. Thank you.
Thank you.